Sunday, September 23rd, you've found the Georgia Gang. And topping our agenda today, Stacey Abrams wins the endorsement of the Teachers Union. Brian Kemp is all about school safety, and there is a big delay on the Gulch Project in downtown Atlanta. Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia Gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
And we're glad you could be with us. We begin this morning with something new, a new member of the Georgia Gang team. And we welcome that terrific political reporter, Lori Gary, to take a look at the week's top story in politics.
Thanks, Dick. It's so great to be a part of the Georgia Gang. In the governor's race this week, it was all about education with an emphasis on school safety. But when you talk about school safety, there's no avoiding the topic of guns.
This isn't a gun control debate.
Republican gubernatorial candidate Brian Kemp unveiled his school safety plan. It's a $90 million proposal that targets the mental health issue by providing every public school in Georgia a counselor. The 2,300 public schools would also receive a one-time funding boost of $30,000 that could be used to improve security, spent on things like metal detectors and cameras.
This has nothing to do with Second Amendment protections or gun control ideas that my opponent may have. This is dealing with school safety.
Gun laws are inherently part of the challenge that our children face.
Democratic nominee Stacey Abrams says if you're going to talk about school safety, you have to talk about gun laws. It was no surprise she received the endorsement of the Georgia Association of Educators this week.
I do not intend to be the education governor of Georgia. That's been tried many times. I will be the public education governor of the great state of Georgia.
Part of Abrams' plan to do that is to eliminate the $100 million tax credit program for private school scholarships. Now, Kemp didn't give specifics on how he would fund his school safety program, only saying he was confident he could work with the state lawmakers to find the money. Dick, back to you.
Thank you, Lori. I think that is the question with Brian Kemp. Will he be able to find the $140 million or so that he's proposing for school safety? And I think we can begin there, start with Brian Kemp. I've talked to a couple of lawmakers who say it's a non-starter, the money isn't there.
Right.
Well, you know, a governor has a lot of control over what the budget priorities are going to be. And of course, as we all know, having followed the legislature for so long, there's always a give and take between the governor's office and the legislature. Part of the plan, of course, are matching grants for school safety and counselors and things like metal detectors. So I think, like we've seen many a time in a session, you'll see if there's a Governor Kemp, you'll see him working with the legislature to get probably some of this.
But what I also thought that was so interesting, Dick and Phil and Alexis, is that, you know, Stacey Abrams has come out and said, hey, I want to be the public education governor. And one thing that we've seen in polling for many, many years is that funding public education, making it accessible for as many students as we can make it accessible to, is something that along party lines polls very high. And so I think that when you also look at some of the school killings that we've had across the country, some of the worst massacres that we've had in our history, these two candidates have got to have a pretty specific plan about how they're going to keep the students and the teachers and counselors and everyone who work at these schools safe.
Right, and I think that Brian Kemp was very fuzzy about that in terms of gun control and gun safety in the schools.
Well, he did say there was $30,000 per school.
Yeah. For
some improvements. There will be counselors in every school, he said, though we've had trouble getting nurses in every school. We should point that out. And I don't know. It seems to me that Theron makes a point. Stacey Abrams is on a little firmer ground there, winning the endorsement of the Teachers Union and laying out a school plan.
Yes.
Even if it means punishing the rich and abandoning every child who's in a private school, as she appears to be doing, because she wants to be the public education governor. That eliminates 10% of the school population right there. She's not going to serve them. She doesn't care about them. And she's going to take away the money that's used to educate them.
Well, you mentioned she was endorsed by the Georgia Association of Educators, and that's the affiliate of the left-wing National Education Association. So naturally, they're anti-private school and they're anti-private choice, and that's Abrams' platform. No parental choice.
It's not anti. It's pro-public education for equal opportunity for all.
Well, just pointed out they're cutting. she wants to cut private education.
Well,
yeah,
she's cutting the benefits for that, but she's using the money to support children who don't have the advantage of having that money.
Now, an interesting thing is in this year of candidates running in tickets, what's interesting to me, this past week, Stacey Abrams was originally trying to make the campaign this past week about health care. She rolled out a voluminous health care plan.
Yes.
It was very interesting reading. And then suddenly it switched to her endorsement by the teachers union. And she's attacking Brian Kemp on the air for not having a health care plan. In fact, that's a pretty effective commercial where she says there's only seven words about health care on the
Everybody
website.
should have it.
But the Republican candidate for lieutenant governor, Jeff Duncan, issued a health care plan, sort of in tandem with Brian Kemp. Is that enough? It wasn't very detailed.
Well, actually, it's a great plan, and a lot of it is this rural health care tax credit that Jeff Duncan, when he was a lawmaker in the legislature, championed. It's a great thing. It helps rural hospitals get more equipment, and basically, Brian Kemp has signed on. That you talk about a ticket.
That's what I mean.
And you know, I don't care if there's 7 words or 7,000 words. Stacey Abrams can have 7,000 words of basically BS on her website. But I think this is a solid plan that Kemp and Jeff Duncan. We hadn't really talked about Duncan.
That's not a solid plan. Tax credits.
It's the law.
Rich people can get a tax credit if they want to
You always say you want to help rural Georgia. This is already helping rural Georgia.
Stacey Abrams has a plan to help rural Georgia by expanding Medicaid throughout the state, which will help rural hospitals.
So it's free health care for everybody who wants it.
It's health care for everybody who needs it. Health care for everybody who needs it.
So one thing that was interesting to me is that that was pointed out in Abrams' plan and also by a lot of news outlets in this debate. You know, 13% of people right now in Georgia don't have any health insurance, and GBPI projected by 2026, rural health care, people in rural areas who do not have health care could climb to upwards to almost 30%. And so I think, as we talked about last week, and to Alexis' point, is that this is the one issue, guys, that I think that while Abrams has rolled out, you know, plan after plan every week, the media won't cover it because they just really want to cover some of the personal attacks and a lot of the things that they're seeing on the media.
Well, be fair there. It's complicated.
No, but in 2018, if you're running for governor, and no attack just on Brian Kemp, you've got to have a very robust and specific plan about health care. It is something that has been issue after issue, after campaign, that has been at front and center in the governor's race. And so I think her detailed plan, while Republicans may argue the cost of it being a little too high, I'm telling you, if you go around this state, which I have, and you talk to people in these rural areas, they want a governor that has a clear, concise solution to help them with their rural challenges.
Well, except that the cost is overwhelming. That's what Abrams doesn't want to tell people.
It isn't. Well, it's overwhelming, but also you get federal support for the expansion of Medicaid.
And despite the great Donald Trump economy, there was a report this past week that a lot of states are in serious financial trouble. It's sort of hard to believe, but because Georgia's got such a huge rainy day fund and has been such good stewards of the taxpayers' dollars. But there are 7 states in huge budget trouble, and guess what a common denominator is? They all expanded Medicaid, and it's Medicaid that is dragging down their state budgets. And that's what Stacey Abrams is proposing for Georgia.
And Brian Kemp wants more competition. He wants more affordable health care. I mean, this is an Abrams myth that he doesn't have any health care plan. And it was great that he and Jeff Duncan rolled out this plan this week. And again, I have to complain too, Theron. I don't think the media is focusing on either campaign in terms of the guts of their policy issues.
Right.
All right, we got to get out. We probably should talk about paper ballots. No, let's hold it. We'll come back. We'll try to cover it in some detail. We're also going to look at Keisha Lance Bottoms having to delay that vote on the Gulch. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
One last item of statewide interest that we didn't get to in the previous segment. Judge Amy Totenberg, U.S. District Court, ruled this past week that Georgia will vote as usual with the same computers that we've used now for a number of years.
More than 25.
We will not go to paper ballots or a paper ballot backup. She really wanted to go to paper ballot or paper ballot backup, but even she, a liberal Democrat, admitted you couldn't do it in time for November 8th or whatever it is that we have the election, right, Phil?
I think she made the right decision. I think if she had to decide this maybe 3 or 4 months earlier, we would have gone to paper ballots. But I think you're right in what you said.
Well, one of the things that she said that I thought was very interesting, let's not sort of glance over this, and I want to make sure I quote her directly. Judge Totenberg basically said, and I quote, "Some state officials have have buried their heads in the sand."
She was very critical, yeah.
She also said that this has created a bureaucratic confusion and long lines. And so while this injunction, the lawsuit is still continuing, but this was an injunction win for Kemp in his office. But this judge went on the record, now it's written in verbal word, basically saying we've got to figure out this problem. And so while I think that, you know, voters won't have a paper ballot this November, this Judge Totenberg, was very, very specific about this being a problem.
And as we know, the state's proceeding on that. The General Assembly is going to take it up in January.
They hope to have it by the 2020.
And Kemp has already looked at several different systems.
Yeah.
Right, and this is all local control here. You've got to change everything that's going on in 159 counties, and I think the gubernatorial candidates are in favor of a paper ballot with a paper audit trail.
But you know, this judge is just like Mueller. You know, he's out there looking for Russian collusion that doesn't exist. Judge Amy Totenberg is looking at this as if ballots in Georgia have been hacked. No machines have been hacked.
No,
yes,
no votes have been
changed.
changed.
But it doesn't mean they can't be. That's the whole thing.
But it hadn't happened.
But this is what she also said, because again, you know, you got to really read the entire statement. She also said that it opens us up. We are vulnerable. She talked a lot about the vulnerabilities of having these machines in the state. So while she didn't go so far as say we've been attacked,
Is she a computer science professor? Come on.
She's a judge.
But also, if you look at the technology, there are advances made all the time. The city of Atlanta got hacked, for goodness sake.
I think the best thing to do is to look at the software that the vendors are having and proceed with the process that Georgia is going to go through.
Well, that's what it looks like we're going to do.
Well, I didn't mean to spend all that much time on that because Amy Totenberg isn't worth the time of day.
Oh, please.
Oh, no, that's rude. Don't say that. Don't say that.
Long history.
Okay.
But I think we need to look at the city of Atlanta because this is getting serious. And Keisha Lance Bottoms was dealt sort of another defeat by having to pull the vote on the Gulch project off the table of the city council last week. And there is now a majority of the Atlanta City Council that wants an independent auditor to look at the plan for the Gulch, the financing, the question of whether it's $1 billion or $2 billion, just a pretty big gap there, right?
Yeah.
And whether this huge development should go forward.
I wouldn't characterize it as a defeat. I think it's doing a democratic process.
Oh, and I agree.
Looking at how you get information, how you look a major project, a public-private partnership. I mean, I think it's taking a normal course that maybe it didn't take in the prior administrations, where the mayor could just kind of had his posse of majority on the council who would support whatever he's put forth.
I love that name, the Nod Squad.
Yeah,
they called the council members the Nod Squad.
But also, if you look at the mayor's statement, you know, and I agree with Lexa, this was not a defeat. She actually owned the sort of the postponement of this robust conversation. I mean, she sent out a very specific statement saying, "I've listened.
No, I agree.
I've listened to the people." So for our viewers, you know, you have a mayor, to Alexa's point, that says, "All right, there's some unreadiness. We talked about it last week. Some council members have asked some questions. And so she now is going to open up City Hall and say, hey, come and hear a detailed plan that outlines, you know, all the details about this plan and really educate the public on this. Because I think that, so for her doing that, and look, there are some council members who raised some legitimate concerns. There are some that are just basically, I think, playing political football. They're definitely trying to use this as an opportunity to raise their stock. And this is politics, right? You can't be mad about it. But my last point is this, Dick. I just think that this deal, if people have the chance to really understand it, it could bring hundreds of millions of dollars to this city around developing downtown, which I think we're all in favor of, and making sure that she honors her affordability and affordable housing commitment in this city.
Well, the big question is what you're posing. We all are in favor of developing this underdeveloped area, but we're talking about $1 billion of taxpayer money, and the council, rightly so, I think you set it up properly, are asking all the questions which originally the mayor didn't want to be answered. She did, to her credit, bend now to this very complicated deal, and we're learning more about it day by day, week by week.
Well, she got a big break this week, too. The governor came out again and said this is a needed project.
Yeah.
And Governor Deal did something that I wish that everybody would do on this. He made a very simple point. It's not like we're spending this public money. we're not collecting taxes now on most of the Gulch.
Right.
And we're not going to collect it in the early days of the new project. Those taxes, we're not taking money from the taxpayers.
Right.
Right, and the governor is a great communicator on this, and I think that that was a narrative that the city and the governor wanted to put out there. I mean, this is a undeveloped jewel in our city, and I think that really the state is actually putting in almost 2 to 1 as far as funding than the city's putting in. So while this is kind of on the mayor and the city council, the state also has a great deal of influence on how this goes forward.
And the state should, because its investments include the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, the Georgia World Congress Center.
That's right. It's right by the Mercedes-Benz Stadium for those folks that don't quite know where it is.
And the new state, what is it? The insurance company arena. What is it?
Phil's going to tell us in just a minute why it's a really good idea. I'm going to turn your words right around on you, Philip, but we'll do that after a profit center. Stay with us.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
And I want to be very clear. I do support the Gulch project. I do, because I think you have to use seed money to energize the private sector. And this is, after all, a private sector project. The risk truly is on CIM Realty of Los Angeles and the Ressler brothers. I think that ought to be said. But Phil, I was teasing you gently, but for all the hoorah in Cobb County, a development like the Gulch, in a sense, a public-private partnership, the Battery and SunTrust Park, has turned out to be a huge economic success for that suburban operation.
Well, it has been a huge economic success. I went over to the news conference the other day by SunTrust Park and Battery over in Cobb County, and I was blown away, and everybody was blown away by the new numbers that were done by the Georgia Tech economic development folks. Just for a couple quick examples for the audience, $19 million annually is going to the Cobb County government funding and Cobb school system. There were a lot of skeptics, I myself included. The takeaway from that meeting for me, though, was the $1 billion in what they call the halo effect from the whole development of the Cumberland area and the Cumberland CID money going into that, and all the money that's being spread out. If you haven't been over there, I think you ought to go see this work and play megaplex. It's absolutely amazing.
Well, and the shame of it is, we talked, Alexis, about prophets without honor in their own land. Tim Lee got turned out of office as Cobb County Commission Chairman over this. Mike Boyce had to come in and raise taxes to make a show out of it.
But remember, it was the transparency. Well, it was the transparency issue that got Tim Lee, which a lot of people to this day still didn't like.
Which is what I think is good about the Atlanta Gulch project, because they're being very transparent and deliberate about how they're going to participate. So
we do need to know in the Gulch project, though, if Kasim Reed and Sim, the developer, made any private deals.
So let me answer that question. And so Sim has a letter that they have produced that they may share that answers a lot of questions, a lot of the rumors that we've been handing around town. So I think stay tuned on that, Phil. There's been a lot of articles kind of going around about whether or not Donald Trump and some of his cronies or his investors are in the deal. So I think they're going to answer that question as well. So I don't want to.
Well, they've already said there is no Trump or Jared.
Well, they have said that, but I think they're going to go a step further, and that's why I think leading up to this town hall, you're going to see some more information coming out for CIM about some of the rumors that have been out there.
Well, and by the way, we should mention too that in Gwinnett County there's a weird sort of development deal. The commission approved something called the Rocket Project.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to me that this day and age, they've got a project there that they've rezoned that's supposed to create 1,800 jobs, and has not been made public who the company is. It's pretty remarkable, isn't it, that you can keep a secret that long?
This is tricky in the economic development world, because you're obviously journalists and the people want to know exactly what's going on, and I'm very sympathetic to that for openness and transparency like we just talked about. However, if you're in economic development, you don't want North Carolina to steal away this company, or California, or whatever. So it's all in timing, and that's kind of what tripped up Tim Lee, I think, and the Braves thing, if you want to talk about Cobb County.
Now, I want to go back to the city of Atlanta just briefly, because I was very surprised. Somehow I thought that Monday's city council session was all about the Gulch and the deferral of the vote and so forth, and the need to hire an outside auditor. I just missed it, but there were hundreds of people there complaining about crime in Buckhead. Hundreds of them. And they were not happy campers. And they looked organized, Phil. And that you've been beating this drum now for several years about crime in Zone 2.
Absolutely, and it's not just Zone 2 where shootings and carjackings are up. It's several other zones in the city. And of course, recently we had, which I think was a mistake, that George Turner, the former chief, has now been put in as a public safety commissioner over the police chief that's there. They're trying to address what those people were upset about. But I think we need to have another pay increase. I hope we all are in favor of that. For the police force, they are just underpaid and we're understaffed. We were promised under Mayor Kasim Reed, 2,000. We had it for a little while, and now we're short about 600 officers, which is causing this crime problem.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why you saw the move for George Turner, who I've said on this broadcast, I think did a really good job as being chief. No offense to Chief Shields, I think she's doing the best job she can with the resources that she have at her disposal. But to see these residents, as you pointed out, did come down to City Hall.
I've seen that in years, by the way.
Yeah, and it also, gives now the mayor and her public safety team an opportunity to not just focus on Buckhead, which I think they're going to do, but to just really have a smart solution about how we have more community policing, how we really deal with this retention issue that we have in the city of Atlanta, where a lot of the officers get trained and they go out to some of the surrounding counties and make a little bit more money. So I agree with Phil. I think pay raise is part of the solution, but I think that George Turner working in concert with Erica Shields and other public safety officials, I think you'll start to see a decline in crime in the city.
Well, but it's interesting. I saw one set of statistics, and I think, Phil, you've said this before. Crime in the city of Atlanta overall is stable. It's not up, it's not down, it's but in Buckhead and Zone 2,
in different zones,
it's up 14%.
That's where the thieves go where the money is.
And murders, this is sad to say, murders are up in the city of Atlanta 25% from the same period last year. But I do, Theron, I think if you had your way and we could wave the magic wand, wouldn't you want that money that's probably going to go to George Turner now, the new public safety director, 200,000, 300,000? Wave that wand. It should go to the policeman.
I'm going to wave the wand. I think the Hawks have stepped in and they said, hey, you know what, we'll pay for George Turner.
I think that deal's going to be derailed.
But then the council, I mean, you're a good friend, I think, and he's a good councilman, but Howard Shook, I think, and others were saying, oh, we want to pay him because we want to have some oversight.
It's called ethics.
Yeah, and so,
we don't want to be beholden to
So I think that
it would be a gift.
I actually don't blame him for saying that after what we've gone through with the Kasim Reed administration.
Well, but I think that the Hawks stepped up big time and definitely wanted to bring him back and willing to pay for him.
But Theron, let's give the money to. I agree. We both agree. Let's give the money to the officers.
I'm all about giving officers more money.
We got to get out
to protect.
When we come back, we will try again with winners and losers. Stay with us.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
And we'll begin winners and losers with you, Philip.
Well, thank you. I'm going to make a winner, Public Service Commissioner Chuck Eaton. A lot of folks don't focus on the Public Service Commission. There are 2 races up. He's running for re-election. And this is, as we're all kind of amateur political scientists here, this is interesting. Chuck Eaton has been endorsed not just by business groups and the Chamber of Commerce, but also by the AFL-CIO and the Building Trades Union. I've never seen anything like that. He's a Republican. God bless him. I hope he wins. And it's because of Plant Vogel, and we want to keep the project going for clean, safe, reliable energy, and that's the largest building construction project in the state, so I think the unions are for Chuck Eaton.
All right, you have a loser?
I got a loser, and that is basically the whole system where Dan Gassaway, an incumbent Republican, has to have his election done over again because of a horrible mistake where voters were doing the wrong district. That should never have happened. That Board of Elections
was in White County.
That's right. They are the losers there in that county.
Darren.
I want to wish my mom a happy birthday.
Yay.
And so I'm going to look in the camera and say happy birthday, Mom. She turned 74. She's probably going to kill me for saying her age on TV. But she's my hero. She's a lovely woman who raised me and all my siblings. And definitely want to make Michael Thurman, DeKalb County, and the Board of Commissioners a winner. They began paving about 300 miles of just bad roads in DeKalb County. So this is another big win for the commission, big win for the CEO as they move forward. And then lastly, I want to recognize Jason Larry and the mayor of Stonecrest. He came out this week and announced on Monday that he has cancer and that he's going to take some time off to really receive some treatment. And so I think I want to wish him well, a speedy recovery, and definitely want to pray for him and his family.
All right, Alexis.
Okay, I'm going to salute the Atlanta Public Schools. They got their highest graduation rate ever, 79.9%, just shy of the state graduation rate. So that's 2,436 graduates for this 20-year 18.
Overall, the state rate was up just a little bit.
Yes, so it's a good thing. And they've come with a common denominator for measuring that rate, too, so you can count it.
I will quickly plug the Falcons. We've got the game with the Saints, always on Fox, and we'll see you next week on the Georgia Gang. Hope the Braves have clinched.
I didn't get my number.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.